I called and I said, yeah.
So I've known Andrew Kwatinetz, for as long as I've been at Microsoft, and he's always seemed to have the lead on what was happening at Office and the wherewithal about the organization and how research can ideally interact with Office. We were having a talk recently about the current organization, and I realized I had some questions about what was going on with the various kinds of PMs and GPMs and who was talking to who and how are things structured. And after a couple of graph theoretic sketches, I said, you know something, let's share this with research, because it's very interesting, and especially if this organization is related somehow to the success of Office, we should all hear about this, and also it'll help us make more efficient our interactions with Office. But before starting, I thought I would first show a brief snippet of how I first met Andrew in 1993 in a usability study that MSR in its early days and Office commissioned together to understand whether or not human beings could serve as experts watching a screen of someone using Excel to figure out how to best help that person as part of our intelligent help work. So Jim, can you roll that snippet? Here's someone using Excel. Meanwhile,
and this person's very good at keyboard shortcuts.
In the soundproof booth.
Or they're very proficient with selection, so you don't really need help there. Not sure what they did with that. They're trying to center that. I wish I could see their whole sheet all at once. Okay, row height. So I'm going to give them a direct that they can just drag the row and column headers.
This is the first clipping advice ever.
You can just drag.
The key is I couldn't hear them, just like they couldn't hear me. So I had no idea what they were doing. I was set up.
Find a place to put it. I'll go down to the bottom table, make sure there's space here. Doesn't really.
Don't know if they need that. They might have one set specific one.
Okay, just drag the row or column headers to change the height or width.
Looks like they were just guessing.
You can just drag the row or column
okay,
headers
now
and
they're
go up to the column header here.
Yeah, monthly travel total, entertainments per month.
I'm not sure that applies to this task.
So we'll stop there and hear from Andrew. That was a sign of the future. He'll be speaking about
the MS Office team history, organization, and cross-group collaboration, and he's been with Office for 14 years. So Andrew.
Actually, if we went one more second on the tape, you would have heard me say, "It looks like you're trying to write a letter." Yeah, that's a great idea. Anyway, actually, I loved that test. That was one of the best tests we've ever done to date. It was our first big Wizard of Oz test to test the concept. So it was really educational for me from an assistant's point of view and working with the research, to knowing Excel as well as I did, to have to, just not knowing what they were trying to do, try to figure out what kind of assistance to give. And I learned a lot about the social interaction, too, which is a lot of what Eric was working on at the time, and still is working on a lot. The idea that I was much more successful when it wasn't just straight tips, but also, I knew when to be polite, when to be forceful, like, hey, the cost is high, I better jump in right now and take charge. But anyhow, so what we're going to talk about today is Office, this slice of time from 87 till today. That's my life in Office. Office, the product did not exist before then, but some of the components did. And, I figured that there's two questions that probably most people here have. If there's any more, let me know. I'm curious. But first of all, we've learned a lot, often the hard way, a lot of lessons about how to work together across groups within Office, since Office is multiple groups shipping a single product. So I give this talk a lot over lunch. This is the first time I've actually put it together, the slides. But what lessons can other people learn, from what we've done over this period of time? As well as, I'm assuming question number 2 for all of you is, what's up with the Office team? How do we work with you? What's with the quirky things or the some things that might seem bureaucratic, or just trying to get an idea of who we are as a team. So those are the two things I'm going to focus on. I'm curious if there's anything else that, like, main questions people had in coming to this, other than those two basics. Okay. Anyway, you can ask questions as we go. I think we'll have plenty of time for questions. I'm not sure it really will take 60 minutes. And then I'll conclude with where we are now. But you should see, by the time we're done, hopefully you'll see that where we are now is all the lessons we learned along the way, kind of hopefully taking the best of that. So to start with, here's a timeline of Office. I put this together last night, and I just said to myself, egad, I'm about to work on, depending on how you count, I'm working now on my 10th major release of Office, which is pretty good considering, 14 years, which is 12 years full-time and 2 internships. But, that's one of the reasons, actually, there was a comment made earlier, he wanted to come just to see, how I was able to survive 14 years. I must have some good wisdom. But I'll tell you, when you're shipping products to customers and people care about the products and you're affecting people's lives and you're shipping, that's pretty exciting to me. So, I've actually been tempted many times to leave the Office team, and I've thought about doing different things. I've moved around a lot within Office, which I think is something we do a lot, which I'll talk about. But it's been a great ride for me. So I look forward to more things that we can do. But when I look at this time period, I've chunked it into 4 different periods. The different eras of Office, kind of the pre-Office, the Office by task force, when we really started doing shared code, and then what I call what we do now, which is more scenario teams. So I'll focus on each one of those, talk about what the organization was like, why we made the changes, and what lessons we've learned. So to start with, so before Office, when I first started, there was no Office team. I find myself needing to remind people of this, because I think people take it for granted now that, of course we can ship 12 products the same day in the same box to the same customers. Like, that's a trivial thing. The reality was, not only were there separate teams, but the teams weren't even close. Bill was in the Excel team. He could tell you. We didn't talk to the Word team. We didn't even know them. They were in another area. I mean, actually, it was smaller, so we kind of knew them. But I'm generous in how I drew the lack of alignment, because as many of you know, the history of the first version of Access took about 4 or 5 years to create. The first version of Word was supposed to be a year project, took about 3 years or 4 years. So Excel I put ahead. I was lucky to be on that team. I won't take credit for it, but I was lucky to be on that team because there's a lot of great lessons learned from there. And to me, that was kind of the key thing. And then actually, I should add, late in this period of time, I forgot about my build, Office Marketing came along with some tape and actually created the first version of Office. But it had nothing to do with development. It really was just kind of putting the boxes together and calling it Office. The amazing thing was that was a big success. So, of course, that led to the next era. But, the highlights for me, and this really was the Excel 2 and 3 time, was among that chaos, Access taking 5 years to ship and Excel doing, shipping multiple releases during that time, there really was a lot of competition and a lot of learning things the hard way. And the whole Office and Applications division kind of learned a lot of best practices from that period of time. So, for instance, the milestone methodology, which is pretty standard. It's even the new hire class you learn about milestones. Excel 3 was the first project to do that. So if you're wondering how David Cole became a vice president so fast, it's because he was one of the people who worked on that. And we actually shipped Excel 3, I think it was a week later than the originally scheduled date. So in the time of software shipping 2 or 3 years late, that was a pretty remarkable thing. And, over the history of Office, we sometimes stray from that, but we always kind of go back to this ability to divide a project into chunks so that you actually have the ability to change course midstream. So that was a big deal. Excel also was the first project to have a program manager, first project to do usability testing, and so a bunch of things like that. So we learned a lot of just best practices. But there were a lot of things wrong, obviously, with working across teams. It was also exciting because it was a time when we really kind of, I think the whole Office culture of focus really came out of, I think, the work that went into Excel 3 when, the Excel team, which was very much an underdog competing with Lotus 123 at the time, made the decision to, instead of doing the 3D spreadsheets, that was the big feature of 1, 2, 3, to instead focus on AutoSum and toolbars and some basic user features. And that was such a big success that I think all the applications really got excited about that, and kind of the Chris Peters, can we get 80% of the bang for 20% of the work? Let's not do some super expensive feature like 3D spreadsheets, even though that sounds so cool and interesting. We can save more time. And actually, Chris was just when he came up with the AutoSum idea, it was just he had read an article about counting keystrokes. And he just went, wow, sum is the most popular thing. And we actually had gotten research for the first time that talked about that. And he said, so how many keystrokes does it take to sum up a column of numbers? And he thought, we can make that be 2 clicks instead of, 12 clicks. So pretty basic stuff, but it really still, I think, feeds into a lot of the feeling of the Office team. Again, sometimes we take that too far, sometimes we don't take it enough, but I think that's, a lot of the foundation for the Office culture of focus on the customers, ship great software. It came out of that kind of survival of the fittest from the different application teams. So now we come to 1990, kind of the second era, which I call Office by Task Force. So we have a new team here now. We formed an Office team for the first time. So I did this box here. It was not a development team. So it was some good program managers, some bad program managers, but it was it was just another small team. Office marketing was now having fun with coupons because we made the decision, and actually Pete Higgins made a pretty good decision at the time, very controversial, where he said, you know what, we're going to align everybody's schedules. There were a lot of people unhappy about that, just like there are a lot of people unhappy about recent decision to align Windows and Office. So it's interesting to think about some of these things in historical perspective. So Word, actually, at the time this decision was made, Word was ahead or behind, depending on how you count it, because the last 2 versions of Office in a row had the same version of Word. But the Word team was at code complete, Excel team was kind of halfway through, PowerPoint and Access had just started their new release. And then Pete Higgins said, from this point on, every single version of the applications will ship in the same box. And what we're going to do is, as soon as Word and Excel ship, we're going to put coupons for the next version of PowerPoint and Access, and then the next version of Office, everyone will ship in the same day. People told me it was crazy, and actually that's what we've been doing ever since. So it was quite a big decision, and a lot of good things came out of that.
So I imagine, so right now it's this Longhorn and Hailstorm, MSN, Sync. There's a lot of frenetic activity. Did the same kind of thing happen back then when that came down?
Yeah, the interesting thing, I've actually been referring back to this history a lot back then. So I was in the Excel team, and like I said, so the Excel and Word were told they were going to ship at the same time, and Word was already code complete. So what we first tried to do was we tried to engage the Word team and say, hey, we should have the same menus. Back then, actually, the Word and Excel menus were completely different. Even things that were the same, like cut, copy, paste, and save were in the same positions, but find and replace were completely different. The open and print dialogues were in the same menu commands, but looked completely different. So we tried to engage the Word team, and we pretty much got the, hey, we're done, hands off. And the reality was, at the time, we were thinking, we'd like the Word team to be able to ship. They showed that they had difficulty doing that from their previous releases. So it was something we actually wanted to encourage. So unlike what some people, my recall of that was not a big cross-team success. It was a unilateral effort. The Excel team said, okay, the Word team is done. We could do a better menu design than what the Word team has right now, but we could also do a lot worse. Let's just change ours to be like theirs. And we actually did a lot of work to change to be like them. And then we'd say, if something absolutely didn't work, we'd say, look, we did 90% of the work to make ourselves consistent. Can you just change this one thing? And then they were a lot more receptive to it because they were so impressed with how Excel was looking like Word. Again, a very controversial thing. That was probably, actually, I own that specific feature, the menus. And that was probably one of the hardest features, if not the hardest I ever owned, because just even people within my own team were sending me hate mail. Like, how could you change, how could you get rid of the formula menu in Excel? And, but luckily John Devon was the dev manager and was a big supporter of it, and we got lucky because a couple new hires who were assigned to work on it ended up being like superstars, like Anil Bhansali, who is a dev manager in Office still. So, yeah, so it's interesting to look back on that. So when I talk to the Windows team now, I say, hey, the Office team is ahead, and we've finished a lot of code. I've been in your spot before. Do me a favor, don't reinvent everything we've already worked on. If it's good, we've had smart people, and it's designed, so there's multiple correct answers, but we have one correct answer. For better or for worse, why don't you just take what we have and let's focus on the other areas where we can improve it instead of fighting over redesigning. So I'm hoping that will work in this situation, and we'll learn from history, kind of shortcut. So some other cool things that came out of then is this. We really started in this period of time. We really started focusing in on customers and customer research. We probably did the best work with product support that I think we've done to date. Maybe we take that for granted a little. We should probably do a better job with them moving forward. We had some vision areas like list management. So it was the first time we weren't a collection of features anymore. We were really trying to focus on end-to-end scenarios. And the other cool thing is, and this is a big thing in Office, is we did a postmortem at the end of a project. All projects do, but we really do take these things seriously. We changed. In fact, if you look at the history of Office and everything I'm showing you, a lot of these changes came from people in the team saying we should make these changes, and so it's not like everyone completely agreed, but like at this time in the postmortems, it was very clear that this designing software by committee, which is what we were doing in this time frame, other than the unilateral efforts, there were definitely some committee efforts. And even things like, it's this time frame that we introduced tooltips, that little feature where you hover over a button and it tells you what it is. That took months to implement that feature. Chris Graham had the simple idea. He was one of the people in the Office team. He prototyped it, had like a whole working prototype, and all the teams had to do was take the code. And you would not believe the fights that broke out. So it all had to be kind of escalated, and people were saying, I'm going to quit if it gets implemented that way. I mean, really unhealthy things. So while we were successful, it was really clear, we were successful at too high of a price for the organization. So a lot based on the postmortem and based on recommendations, we changed our process again. And that led to the now building using shared feature teams. So this is Office 95 and 97, just to bring you up to date on that. And so we introduced an Office development team now for the first time. It was about the same size as all the other teams. And actually Outlook came into the picture here. I put them a little to the left because they were actually supposed to ship with Office 95 and ended up not shipping until Office 97, probably because of all those features that they had in version 1. And that's actually one point I should make. Actually, I meant to make earlier. But the one interesting thing about all the old app teams is it's amazing how much legacy, gets introduced before you're thinking about the whole system. That's always been an issue with Office, is how do you get all the individual components to focus on the larger system and the complexity of that? Because everything has a cost. I mean, I was thinking about like good examples of where legacy comes back to hurt us and how people don't think ahead. And I was thinking, I remember for Excel 2, I owned keyboard shortcuts. And for Mac Excel 1, every letter was assigned to a function. They didn't save a single command letter shortcut. So the only way to add new shortcuts would be to remove existing shortcuts that people might be using. So similarly, I think in retrospect, if you talk to people who worked on Outlook and people who work in Office, the price of coming in with version 1 with every feature anyone could ever imagine. I mean, it was very good for Outlook, the individual product, to try to compete. But it made it a lot more complex because then when we had shared initiatives, their product was so complex that it was hard to integrate all the shared initiatives into their product. So Outlook was definitely a step behind, and it wasn't until kind of Office 2000 that Outlook caught up with the whole Office process. And unfortunately, here's an example of us making a mistake we should have learned from times ago, but that's kind of pretty typical, unfortunately. So, but what we did is, you can see now, all the schedules were lined up. We started and finished at the same date. That was the goal from day one. Everyone knew that the people in the PowerPoint team knew that if they were a year late, Word was going to have to be a year late because there was no option to ship independent. And the Office team was building shared code. I drew this little OI thing. That's what that is, the little gray box, because the Office team was building shared code, and it was up to all the individual teams to take that shared code and put it in their products. That didn't actually work out that well. So when I forward ahead, you'll see that's something we changed. But we learned a lot about that. What's it?
Some examples of the shared code.
Yes, I'll give. So, for instance, for Office 95, Answer Wizard was a piece of shared code. Now, Answer Wizard, what worked really well about this organization is we were gonna have shared code. Previously, when we would look at assistance topics, we'd have 6 different people, or 5 different people coming up with ideas for assistance. They would come into a committee meeting and then try to argue which one was best, and that just never really worked out. Now, only one person was in charge of assistance, and he was in charge of it for all of Office, and whatever ideas, better or worse, it was going to be better if it was the same in all the applications. And things were working great. Actually, Sam Hobson was working with Eric. We had Answer Wizard. We knew it was going to be a great feature, and we built the shared code. The application teams integrated it, and where it really became messy was late in the cycle, because like any feature, when you're doing sharing, like any feature that you're implementing, period, there's always going to be bugs and design issues that you learn about late in the cycle, and you need to be able to fix them. The problem with this model, and this, by the way, continues to be a pretty popular model at Microsoft, unfortunately. The problem is, late in the cycle, when these bugs come up, what happened to Sam is he'd get these 10 bugs, and he was a good program manager, so he wouldn't say, oh, we have to fix all 10. He would prioritize them and say, okay, I think we should fix, 1, 3, 7, and 9. But then he'd have to go to the Word team and say, we should fix 1, 3, 7, 9. Excel team, we should fix 1, 3, 7, 9, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And 5 different developers would come back and say, well, there's no way I'm fixing 1 and 3. I'll fix 2, 4, 7, and 9. And then the Excel person would say, oh, I'll do 1 and 3, but there's no way I'm doing 7 and 9. And Sam had this impossible problem of how is he going to get, he'd go to the Word team, and we would start, again, any bad organization requires you to have to escalate up through management, and then, the Word management would say, well, we have this background spell check fix and work we have to do, and that's the same developer, and we can't trade that off. That's more important than Answer Wizard, right? And we were in this awful position where we couldn't control our own features. So while it was a very successful time, and we did get a lot of shared code, there were a lot of problems with that process. And again, we had this design by committee, and so many people needed to be involved, and consistency and shared code, but at what price? Again, people were leaving and quitting and unhappy. So clearly we wanted to change that. Just some other key highlights to keep in mind. During that period of time, we learned a lot about what it means that we were in the upgrade business now, not the new products business. And that was a pretty big shift for us. And I remember when we started running the numbers where we just started saying, like when we first started Office 97, it was supposed to require 16 megabytes of memory, and everyone said there's no way it'll work in 8 megabytes. Every release of Office, we always double the memory requirements. And I remember Mark Cruz and I worked up some spreadsheets where, even in the worst case customer scenario, meaning low number of upgrades, we were going to lose $1 billion if we required 16 megabytes versus 8 megabytes. So actually it was such an awakening for the whole team to realize that, wow, we really have to change the way we do work. We also started focusing on things like TCO, the total cost of ownership, and IT people, and kind of taking on new customers during this period. And then we also, this whole idea of lining up all the schedules, it's amazing how hard that is. And again, I think from outside Office, it's an easy thing to take for granted, but I just ask yourself, how often does a product in Microsoft ship on the day that they say they ship? It's like close to 0. So to take 7, 8, if you start focusing on the smaller teams that provide us components, maybe 10 to 15 teams, and say you're all going to ship on the same day, that almost sounds impossible, right? So you do have to add some process. And I'm not sure people from the outside appreciate how important that process is. So I think when you're in the office team, you think, wow, our process is actually pretty lightweight, considering. I mean, I don't think we feel like we're bureaucrats. But I think people from the outside really see office as this unapproachable, the Borg, and, you better line up with their ship date. And I just think it's because we were able to see just how hard it was just to even ship single applications. So we really learned a lot about, well, what does it take to do that? A big part of it is matrix management. And you'll see when I showed the existing office organization, the office team, in addition to having general managers for each product team, the office team had directors of functions. So there's a director of program management who, even though all the GPMs don't report to him, he's in charge, has like a dotted line relationship to, all the PMs in the organization. And there's a director of development and a director of testing. And those people are really in charge of manage the schedule and manage best practice and manage the communication. So we really became, I was director of program management for just over 2 years. And I became kind of the master of setting up meetings. I set up so many big meetings and these big emails and stuff. But you point to these things, and they're pretty essential. Like we just had, actually, for the current version of Office we're working on, the new version, we just had our first demo day. And we started doing demo days around this time, where we would bring, like at the end of a milestone, we would bring the entire product team into a conference room. And we would demo features to each other. And it's amazing just how much easier that makes it for the teams to work together. And when you're trying to, ship what seems like a single product, you have to go out of your way to make things like this happen. So we have weekly meetings with all the leads and things like that. So it's actually been working out okay. But again, it seems like heavy process from the outside. But that's a great way to understand how Office works, to sit in on one of those kinds of meetings. Another key to our success was moving people around. So I was in the Excel team, then I moved to the Word team, then I was in the Office team, I moved back to the Word team, and there's a lot of people who did things like that. And looking back, that was definitely a key to our ability to work together across teams, that we knew each other. It wasn't that stupid Office guy is trying to force us to do something. It was oh, that's John Devon. He used to be my manager. John used to joke around. He used to tell people, hey, wait a second, my IQ didn't just drop 100 points just because I switched teams. So give me the benefit of the doubt here. Listen to what I'm trying to say. And actually, it did work. I mean, I think the fact that when we first formed the Office development team, it was formed by taking people from the product teams. Probably the thing that worked against the process is exactly that, though. That it was more of an optional thing. So it was announced that we were forming an Office team, and people were asked to volunteer to be in the Office team. And unfortunately, in many cases, not in all cases, but the people who cared most about Office all said, yeah, I'm going to go join this Office team. And you were left with the people who cared the least about Office and the product team. So it took, that's probably an oversimplification, but it definitely, there definitely were some struggles to begin with, but we got past it. And, it's just the idea that people were starting to own problems again versus the committees was great, but we knew it also didn't work completely. Yeah.
So is there a sense of within Office that it's good to move between products and Office and products and so on?
Yeah. So the question is, is there a sense that it's good to move within products, and the answer across products, and the answer is definitely yes. People are encouraged to do that, and it happens all the time. In fact, a big role of the director function is to make sure, like, if a lead position opens up in one team, that you don't just assume that that person gets hired out from that team. It should be the next best person in the entire Office organization. In fact, you definitely want to encourage that. And we also saw a lot of people at ship time moving across teams. What we do now in Office is, when I'll get to it, is since we actually changed the teams. Some teams don't even exist across versions because we're focusing on a different thing. So people have to move across teams. So there always has been a lot of juggling around. I think it's a great lesson for the whole company, really, because now that the whole company isn't growing as much, it's not like there's all these new manager positions opening up. So the great thing about moving across teams in Office as opposed to just moving to some just random other group in the company is you're able to leverage the contacts you have and a lot of the knowledge you have. So it really is a great career move for people too. So it was kind of a win-win situation and was definitely encouraged. The only other thing I'll say too is about this period is in Office 97, it also was a great time when we could show how the milestone process really worked, because at the end of milestone 2, the internet struck, and we didn't have a lot of web features planned when we started the project, and the fact that we came to a close of milestone 2, we were able to change cut features from milestone 3, add web features, and then we shipped the product where a lot of the big features were all ones that we didn't even have any clue about when we started the project, yet we were still able to ship pretty much within the time schedule that we said we were going to. So we were able to prove to ourselves we still knew how to do this. So anyway, the problems I talked about with the integration team led to where we are today, what I call scenario teams, which is this idea that, well, first of all, the size of the Office team grew. This clearly, again, for customers, they want all our products to work together. And not just Office, of course. They want all Microsoft products to work together. But it was we heard loud and clear. Actually, by the time we got to 1997, I think we were already seeing that the sales of individual applications had pretty much dropped to like under 10%. Almost everyone was buying applications through Office. So we grew the size of the Office team, and then we said, you know what? Instead of having all the other teams implement the shared code, let's do again what some people thought would be impossible or too hard to do, which is let's just say each shared feature team owns all the integration work. And again, let's move people. So instead of shared feature team 1, let's say that's the assistance team or the toolbars team or something like that. Instead of them writing shared code and asking other teams to integrate it, they would also be in charge of writing the code in Excel and Word and PowerPoint and the other applications. The reality is they actually don't write it in all these applications. They write it in like as many as they can, and sometimes the poor teams like Publisher have to write it themselves, just because of the amount of time it takes and having to learn that many different code bases. But the point is, once that team has made it work in multiple applications and they've learned how to do it, then they've really also, it forces them to make the right trade-offs to make sure the code can be easily integrated into the products. And again, all of a sudden everything became fun now, because you could work in a shared feature team and it wasn't like a death sentence, to like years of misery. You actually owned your success or failure, and it was a great shift. I mean, the other thing we did is when we looked back at the work we did in in Office 97 and 95 with shared code, a lot of the shared code was picked, like toolbars. It was things we could share from a technology standpoint. Yet in Office 97, Workgroup was one of the big things, and the web were two of the big things that were our marketing messages, but those weren't shared. And as a result, we actually still did that the committee way, and there were a lot of inconsistencies, and the features didn't turn out as good as they could. So what we said when we started Office 2000, we said, well, why don't we spend some more time up front figuring out what are the most important things to get right across Office from a customer standpoint, and assign those to shared teams, even if we don't even know how the coding would work yet. Basically, just put a team in charge of, you've got to figure out, workgroup collaboration for Office. And if you can use shared code, great, because your job is to write it in all the different applications. So, and that actually worked out pretty well.
How many are there?
So in 2000 we had like 4 or 5, and in XP we had 7 or something like that. So it's been growing, and you'll see when I get to the current org chart, we've grown it even more. Another thing to keep in mind is we added. This was definitely a period of time when we were also playing around with how many applications can we throw into the mix. We had now a front page, with publishers, part of the box, so it became a much bigger challenge. And what we did for XP is we actually didn't even have a separate Excel and Access team anymore. Excel and Access was one team with one general manager, and Word and PowerPoint was one team with one general manager. So we started shrinking those teams and trying to simplify the management structure, yet growing the size of the Office teams. Again, we still have the directors, so that's why the arrows from Office, because the Office team is still in charge of, bringing everyone together and having a single process and managing the project and single communications.
So does that joining of applications reflect anything about the reuse of the old code base?
So the question is, does the joining applications reflect the reuse of the old code base? It definitely reflected the ability to share between them. Like Excel and Access are obviously two of the more similar, just like Word and PowerPoint are. So there definitely was sharing, but there wasn't. It also reflected, attempts to share more, and kind of similar vision between the two. But the reality is that it really was two different. The bulk of at this period of time, the bulk of the work was like work in two different code bases.
So
the Excel and Access team did create these new web components, and that was kind of a whole new area, and some shared data things for sure.
So quick question about ego and camaraderie. So when I first met the Excel team, it was really the sense of we're the Excel team, and as you know, we're different. And
Well, we're the best.
yeah, I mean that's
Nothing to do with ego, just
I know.
objectively speaking.
But there was the sense of people really owning and being in a small software firm. And I'm curious if you give up anything in terms of ownership and our little team when you now flate into this larger setup.
Yeah, so it was definitely hard. And so the question was about ego and this team feeling. I mean, a lot of what we learned from the shift that took us to this organization, I think this approach solved a lot of those problems. The biggest ego issue was when people felt like they weren't in control of their own destiny. I mean, I think, obviously, if you're working in a large team or a large company, I mean, it's not like working in a startup. I mean, so there's pros and cons to that, right? I mean, the good thing is, we're affecting hundreds of millions of people because that's how many customers we have at this time. So, if you want to work at a little startup, yeah, you can make every decision and not have to deal with any kind of committees or bureaucracy, but you're just not solving as big of a problem or as important of a problem. So there was definitely this notion of, that there is an overall office process you have to fit into, and I think that in some ways was less exciting than hey, we're just Excel and we're trying to beat 1, 2, 3. But I think most people in Office realize that this is what our customers want. This is what we're trying to solve. But in terms of the day-to-day work, the biggest issue with Office 97 and 95 and even before with the committees was I would go off and work on a design for months, and we would usability test it and get great usability marks and we'd work it all out. And then someone would come along and say, you know what, that doesn't look like this other thing. You guys have to work this out and make some changes. And then you really would have two good designs and people that had to make changes. And that was just an awful process. I mean, really, people were quitting because of that, and that was awful. So when we got to the point where we said, let's make sure the important things have shared teams. The important things was the key thing, because even though we had shared code in Office 97, the fact that workgroup was still so important that had to be shared, we still had to come in and say, sorry, you guys have, even if we're going to go all the way up to the VP in charge, someone here is going to have to give. And again, that happened. I mean, with Workgroup, Excel and Word both had these little pop-up features where if you did, like the little Post-it note, like if you added a comment to an Excel cell or you added a comment to a Word document, and they looked different. And they had different, one of them had a name and date, the other one didn't, and it was just stupid. And there were features for setting up, there were menu commands for setting up the collaboration. They were different. And both teams, actually this is a real example, both teams had done usability testing. And I was in charge of consistency at the time. And both teams were looking at me saying, you got to be kidding me. Go look at my usability results. This is great. And then one of the big changes we made as a result is we won't usability test the same feature in different applications anymore. We actually do have, even at that time, we had a single usability team. So I think that was a mistake. And actually, so I think we actually just set up one of these stupid tests where we knew what the results were going to be. But all you have to do is watch a customer look at both at the same time, and they'll say, yeah, I guess that's okay and that's okay. But it's really stupid that they're different. So a lot of this is just obvious stuff, but I do feel bad for the people involved because your heart goes into it. And at Microsoft, where people are so passionate, it's not apathy that gets us in trouble. We have too much passion, right? Usually we're slipping not because people aren't working hard, it's because people are working hard and they're adding too many new features. It's just focus. So But getting back to the ego thing, when we got to the point where the important things had shared teams, then those people felt like they owned it from start to finish. I think that really made it fun again. And then the things that weren't owned by shared teams by definition were less important, so there was a little more latitude that, some of the inconsistencies could slide by. I mean, I think the consistency is always right, but at least we had the process set up so we could focus on the high priority things organizationally. And there's a lot of office isn't for everybody. I'd be lying to you if I said morale is high everywhere. People love it, but this works. This does work certainly a little better. There continued to be the issue of we still want to work a lot on this product or this feature area, and but we've really, especially with the shift to services, like when I get to the current org chart, we've really de-emphasized the application work a lot, just because we've learned it's actually hard to do things, not impossible. We will continue to do application-specific work, but it's hard to generate a lot of excitement and to generate a lot of business just by focusing on the individual application things. The office-wide things have been a huge win, as well as the potential to add new scenarios. Like, actually, I should have drawn another box for SharePoint. So we formed new teams and tried to create new things as well. Let me just make sure I haven't missed anything I want to say on this. But this basically worked. It was fun again. We were still making big bets. This is one of the things I'm sensitive to. I mean, I think people think, Office, they're gonna add the new release is some new checkbox and third level menu. But the reality is, at the time when we started Office 2000, and we said we would make HTML be like a real file format for Word, people said we were crazy. And it's not like that feature's been a huge hit, and actually there's some finished work we still need to do on that. But by the time we shipped, people were like, oh, yeah, of course, that was obvious. But, I mean, the fact that we were doing 2-year releases and still making big bets, I think allowed us to still, we actually were, when we shipped Office 2000, a lot of the feedback was we were ahead of our customers. So, that's one thing I like about the team is still willing to make big bets. And I hope you guys have seen kind of reception to that. We did learn a lot about how to work with partners. We had some teams, especially in Office 97, where they had so many dependencies and components coming in that we kind of established this new rule of thumb, which is every team should have a partner and just that one partner. So let's try to prioritize and just have key contacts across, and we even try to organize our teams so that if we know we have big partnership bets, we have one team per partner, just because of all the work it takes to manage partners. We do these things called dependency contracts. That it's probably a bad name for it. People always shudder when they hear that, and we even have some lawyers in the room. But we just found that. We made some big mistakes working with partners where late in the cycle we would say, "Now you guys said you were doing a Japanese release, right?" And they'd say, "Yeah, we said, but our Japanese release is always a year later." And we're like, "Oh my goodness, we ship our Japanese release 30 days later. How are we going to solve this problem?" So we found that if we just took all those issues and just wrote them all down up front, and everyone kind of signed off on it, and we keep updating them, that actually it seems like a real heavy process up front, but it actually avoids the really nasty surprises down the line. So I think people are ultimately happier. But again, it's one of these things where when you work with the Office team, I think people get put off by that because but you have to appreciate the planning that it takes to ship all these pieces at the same time. And again, we were certainly proud that we shipped on 3.2.1, which was the day we said we would ship. So Office XP shipped exactly the day we said we would on an almost 2-year project. So even with the largest number of cross-group dependencies, we still showed that we know how to ship. Was it the right product? That's the separate issue. That's what we have to work on. We still can make mistakes and make the wrong bets, but the fact that we had teams that were working, pretty well, and that we were working together and coordinating, I think we have the right foundation. So that's why we're still in this same era of the scenario teams, because it seems like this organization kind of works. There's a joke about the, we were supposed to ship next September until this Longhorn thing came out. So there's a joke that our next ship date is going to be 6/5/4. Anyway, so summary of key tenets. I think when you talk to office people, and certainly I think you hear it from me, is shipping is very important. We believe that you learn so much by shipping. Actually, one thing I always say is it's amazing how often the things we cut in order to ship are not the things we do the next release. In fact, that's almost true 90% or higher of the time. In fact, often people don't even remember those things that are the most painful things. So to me, that just proves that if you just have an extra year, you're just going to do a year worth of stuff you probably shouldn't have done. Not to mention you risk not even shipping it. So we found that shipping it is great for actually really learning how to build the right products, and then you let the customers give you the feedback, and the customer feedback loop is a big part of it. It's also just been great for our own energy level. Again, the fact that I've been able to last in office so long is a lot because of the shipping, which is great. A lot of focusing on customer scenarios and giving individuals the ability to do that. We obviously have to upgrade the balance between legacy and future stuff. And then we keep doing these postmortems and change. So where does that bring us to today? So the interesting thing, when we started planning the next version of Office, which we call Office.net, but I've been told I'm not supposed to put that in print. So anyway, that's why it's not on the slides.
Why is that?
I don't know why. I'm not sure I understand it.
Office.net.
But when we first started this project, we said, the thing that rang true for everybody is this is not Office 11. And I think everyone in Office kind of knew what we were talking about, meaning we weren't going to build another version of Office with a ton of features and across all the teams. And the things we were really excited about and are excited about is the connection and the new things that are possible by taking advantage of the connection. Both connection across different customers, like the fact that two people can be working on a PowerPoint presentation or delivering a PowerPoint presentation and all being annotating at the same time, or doing things like that, collaborating, or the connection to us, which includes the feedback loop. The fact that today, if I search for help in a product, I'm searching the help files that we wrote months before the product shipped, even if it's a year later. And Microsoft knows what all the problems are. How come I'm shipping this help file on the disk? The connection allows you to just get to the latest stuff. And for us to see what people are asking for and keep updating it. So, we've been doing some work along these lines on our website. So, template gallery is one thing I've worked on, where we actually have these templates like expense reports and holiday letters and calendars and things like that. And it's so incredible to see. Every day I can see what people are downloading. And what people are downloading, we have years of research where we should have been able to guess what the top downloads would be. And you know what? We would have been way off, because nobody in the Office hallway would have said that Calendar would be the #1 download. And it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I think. I mean, Calendar is sort of the most popular thing. There's something so exciting about actually delivering to people what it is that they want. So there's a lot of excitement about that, and the idea of doing this as a web service. And another big part was that everyone's, writing, doing this. We didn't want to grow the size of Office again, because then we'd have these measly, tiny little applications. There's actually a lot of expertise and passion about different areas in the application team. So instead of saying, let's have a big shared data team, in fact, we even started this in XP, and to do all these shared data features. Well, there's a lot of people in Excel and Access that are really excited about data things. Let them own it, but they also have to write, and this is the key part about this current release, they also have to write all the code in all the other applications. So we have people doing data features, in the traditional Excel Access team, which isn't even called that now. It's called the Database, Services team, writing code in Word and PowerPoint and the other applications. So we've kind of spread around. And not to mention, you have some great general, VPs who are in charge of those teams. You can leverage the talents of those people. So what does our organization look like? Well, we've got Steven Sinofsky as our senior vice president, and these are his direct reports. So I drew them in different columns because these three people, so Antoine and Heike and Grant, are those directors I was talking about. So they are in charge of Well, first of all, there are, like I said, about 7 shared Office feature teams. So it's like there's a feature team working on like notifications. There's a feature team working on roaming settings. There's a feature team working on actually the whole build process. There's a feature team working on kind of shared UI things, and so there's feature teams like that are traditional Office shared feature core Office feature teams. These 3 people actually manage those teams together. So for like the notifications team, there is no GM of notifications. There's a GPM who reports to Heikki. There's a dev manager who reports to Antoine, and there's a test manager who reports to Grant. So it's kind of funny, but it works. And but then you've got the managers of what would have been the product teams. So Ralph, for instance, is the vice president in charge of the CMS team, which is the Communication and Meeting Services team. So he has multiple GPMs and dev managers and test managers. They all work for him, but they also each have a dotted line relationship to the director based on their function. So Heikki, for instance, who's the director of PM, has a weekly meeting of all the GPMs. And as well as, actually, there's a lot of if you're interested in just management theory, I think we've really been influenced a lot by Barry Oshry, who came and spoke to Microsoft. And if you've ever done that tops, middles, bottoms simulation, the OWL Inc., what happens is all these people, all of Stephen's reports, meet weekly, both with Stephen and also without Stephen. There's a lot of communication between them, and I think that's a key part, a key reason why the organization works, because Ralph and Kurt and Richard, really are well tied in and in sync with Antoine and Heikki and Grant. So it's not like a competitive thing; it's a supportive thing. And if you're the GPM working for Ralph, you probably hear similar messages about the vision from Ralph as you do from Heikki. So I think without that, it would be pretty difficult. But that's something we established early, and it's been working. Actually, before I drill down on these other reports, I should say that Heikki also owns all of usability and product planning and design. So there is not usability engineers in each of the different service teams. There's one usability team. So even a smaller role, we have kind of matrix roles for functions like that, which like I mentioned with the example with Workgroup, that's a key to our success. That if we want to be successful with these Office-wide initiatives, make sure you design prototypes that are not application specific, and you design usability studies and things like that.
How formally do you do that as far as getting feedback to actually have sections accompany each person? This matrix demonstrated.
Yeah, so the question is how formally do we do this at review time? And the answer is, well, Antoine and Heikki and Grant are in charge of the stack ranking for the functions. So it is actually pretty formal. So obviously, Ralph makes the decisions for his team, but for program management, Heikki has to approve the level of promotions, but it's not an approved, disapproved. I mean, there's just a lot of discussion, but it's set up so that discussions happen. We also, one of the things we encourage a lot, actually this is one of the changes we made based on postmortem feedback, is there was a lot of people after Office 97 who were feeling like, this one person in this one team made my life miserable because they were so hard to work with, yet they got promoted. How could that possibly happen? And even though that really didn't happen very often, there was this feeling of distrust that the organization was fair. So one big thing we changed is we've added, it's not totally formal, but there's kind of this informal process where you're supposed to seek out not just feedback from the people within the same team, but also feedback across teams. So especially for program managers. So if you work in consistency, you actually will be judged based on how well you enable other people to succeed in other teams. And I think, and especially with the moving around, the combination of moving people around and that, I think the right culture has been created where people feel like if they make things happen across teams, they'll be recognized for it. And we have some great examples of people who just made things happen, even if they weren't, like actually Chris Prattley was the lead program manager in Word, and Word was very interested in these multilingual features, a lot of the international features for multilingual users, and documents across countries or organizations that have multiple locations. And it was a big problem for Word, but really a lot of the problems weren't just Word specific. And Chris actually just convinced all the other teams to build the features, and he kind of wrote all the specs for it, and it all happened. And I think that's a real tribute to the organization that it was able to happen, and all the people knew it was the right thing for customers, and people all got the right feedback from it, even though it wasn't one of those key shared areas that was identified. It actually ended up being one of our key selling points for Office 2000. And then the only other thing I should add about the directors is Grant George also manages the operations team, which is a shared team across Office. So Ralph has communications and meetings, which includes, so he's also responsible for the legacy of Outlook and PowerPoint, so there are people assigned to those, as well as new services that are being built out of those teams. Kurt's in charge of authoring and collaboration, which includes Word and Front Page and SharePoint team services and SharePoint portal services, as well as this new thing called Scribbler, which is our tablet application that we're building that you may have heard of. So there's a lot going on there, but again, those are all related to authoring and collaboration. And there's some additional services too, like this document collaboration service and research and reference service. So all the teams really are also investigating what web services, both kind of within the firewall as well as external hosted ones. Richard owns data services. I forget what the second D is for. But that includes, obviously Excel and Access and data and the new business intelligence application we recently acquired, the data analyzer. And Peter Pathay is, I forget what SDS stands for, boy. But he manages the XDocs team, which is
Structured Document Service.
Yes, there you go, Structured Document Service. Thank you. You panic, I forgot. As well as actually a lot of people you may know, he has a bunch of distinguished engineers who are now in his team investigating kind of some future architecture things. But really, actually, that's really almost a separate project. So, as well, I drew the third column. There's also some additional shared service, kind of I guess similar to kind of the directors. Like Gene Sheldon, I'll do Jeff last. Gene Sheldon has sustaining engineering, so all of our service releases, and she spends a lot of time understanding customers, and so we can be more responsive. I think we were really inspired by what the Exchange team has done on this, so we're trying to. This is the second release that Gene's had this role. And then we have a director of office marketing. That was Joseph Krozak, but it was recently announced he's moving to a different role. He's actually going to head up program management for Richard McInish's team, and it has yet to be announced who his replacement will be. So this is a very up-to-date, as of this week, org chart. And then Jeff Oland manages all of UA, so user assistance, all of localization, all of business development, as well as some content services. So Jeff has a team, which actually I'm heading up program management for that, which is kind of these expertise services. And the fact that we're part of the team that also has all the content creation people and the biz dev people who sign all the deals for content and the worldwide people is actually kind of interesting for the kind of things we're trying to do, like delivering templates and directed help and community. Actually, we're working a lot with research on communities and search, things like that. So with that, I guess I'll leave this up. I should leave this up for the Q&A. So other questions about Office?
A little bit ago, you said that PowerPoint and Word had been merged together. Were they separated out again here, or is it different boxes?
It's interesting, actually. We did do a pivot. PowerPoint and Word were together because it was kind of the text editing, groups. There's no running joke that for years Bill has always said, how come PowerPoint and Word aren't just the same application? And because obviously they have a lot in common, but they are very different activities. And PowerPoint's pretty popular. So, but this time around, we decided it'd be interesting to think of PowerPoint more in terms of the meeting services part and kind of the collaboration part. And a lot of the work that was going on in authoring with Word and Scribbler really revolved around meetings and meeting services. So that's why the change was made. But that's part of the new mentality that not everything lives on. For each release, what are the most important things, and focus on that. Although all of the legacy will live on, because obviously we still have to support these things. So every team, even a new team like my team, we inherited some legacy. Like my team inherited the assistant, because that's our area. I won't say what we're doing with it. Yeah.
Maybe you haven't thought much about this, but any ideas for roles for research in, not this version probably because I'm sure we're too late, but maybe the next version, or things where you think research should be thinking about problems?
Well, so the question is about roles for research. There's definitely roles now. I don't think we have to wait for next version. I mean, we're definitely working with a lot of people in research. So I think in the research fair is great. Are you running that again?
Yeah.
And you got that idea from what we did in Office, right? That was one of these big meetings we did.
Invented all on our own. No.
No, but that's one of the great things we did in Office. So
As we had lunch together, I said the reason that it was approved because Dan went there and said this is a great thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, you bet.
No, but it works. I mean, the idea of just having events where people can see each other's technology, you come up with ideas. So I think a lot of actually our ideas for people in research to approach, and a lot of the contacts I think came out of that. But we definitely have a set of people we're working with. If you've got ideas, we are doing more work, and especially in engaging with the Longhorn team, there's a lot of discussion about what are the next big ideas going to be for Office and Windows. So I think there's definitely some opportunities now, as well as moving forward. In terms of, are there big things that I know of where it would really help with research? I guess I should think about that more, and I could let you know. In general, when I think of research ideas, I do try to contact people, though. But it's great to see you're doing the fair again. Maybe another round of contacts will come out of that.
So as you guys expand and do new things like meeting support and whatnot, so there's not going to be a new application. Right? It's going to be sort of, again, a distributed feature among the applications. Is that sort of how new things get added now going forward? Scribbler was a new application. But are there thoughts,
Yeah, so the question is, well, how do we add? Let me make sure I get this right. There is this general issue of, well, do we just keep adding new applications, or does the next release have kind of features that cross all applications? But the interesting thing is when you build a big feature that crosses everything, it almost becomes like a new application itself. And the answer is probably all of the above. We definitely know that there's nothing like a good old-fashioned, add a new application to the box, and people see more value, and then they want to upgrade. But you also have to be careful, because you don't want to just keep throwing additional applications into the box, because a lot of what we learned with the last release is, like, throwing front page in the box is just a good way to lose all that front page revenue that we could have made separately. So there's a lot of business discussion going on now about, is there a separate Office SKU, kind of like the Windows, what's it called there, add-on pack, the Plus pack. Yeah, could there be like like every corporation feels like they need Office Pro and the Office, Plus pack, plus maybe they want certain Office family members like Project, which remain pretty profitable. So there's a lot of business discussions going on about that. In terms of from the customer, certainly because of the web service focus we have, I feel like the website will feel like a whole new application. And that's one of our big challenges moving forward, is how do we add a suite of web services that all feel like they're all, come from the same vendor, and they all make sense, and they all work with all the different products. But there's no magic answer to this. And unfortunately, every time you throw more in the SKU, the upgrade takes even more. So in a way, actually, the promise of subscriptions for us is that the pressure is less on delivering, all new value, like brand new things, and instead we focus more on how do we deliver continued value. Like, I pay for, you can't, subscribe to, the New York Times and expect to pay one price and then you get it for the rest of your life. You keep paying ongoing, and I think that's the model we're hoping we can shift to, and then we can decide always what's best and not have to feel like we have to justify the upgrade by, doing SKU games.
Can you share anything about any kind of regularity with which you address the issue of designs for with and without web subscription, internet subscription? Some way you can characterize the kind of service you want to deliver as standalone and how it will extend with service, subscription service?
Yeah, so the question is about how we're approaching the with or without subscription. It is kind of like two different offerings in many ways, and it's been something we've been struggling with. I think the whole company's been struggling with it because on one hand, I think we'd love to make a big bet on subscriptions, and we have some data that shows that customers are excited about the services we're talking about. But at the same time, we have a lot of data that says if we just did subscriptions, we know there's a large set of people who aren't going to be ready to pay for Office that way or want to pay for Office that way. A lot of countries around the world where we get a lot of our revenue, they may not be as ready. And even in the United States, it's not like everyone has cable or DSL connections. So we're kind of approaching it cautiously. I think we want to definitely establish a subscription business in this next release, but we are. We will also have a lot of features that work outside the subscription. So we kind of have a range. When we've been doing our reviews for this release, that's been part of the standard review format, is what will your experience be like with the subscription and without. And some services, like the services I'm working on, the experience will be nothing without. We're all focused on it. But the bulk of services have a hosted story, and then we all are continuing to do standalone things. Like there'll be some new exciting Outlook features. There'll be, new applications like Scribbler. So I think we're kind of, 1 foot in each camp right now. We haven't made a huge bet, and I don't think our stockholders would want us to make that huge leap just yet. But I'm glad we're at least being pretty radical about it and trying to learn about it. That answers your question. Yeah.
So with the Longhorn schedule sync, you have another year. What are you going to do?
Yeah. So the question is, Longhorn schedule sync. We have another year. What are we going to do? And the answer is, we're figuring that out right now. It is one of these things where it is hard. This is a new challenge for us because it's like the mythical man year. Can you just throw another year in and do a whole another set of work? So we're going to try to figure. Hopefully we could figure out things to do. We're very reliant on the Longhorn team coming up to speed, and if we're integrating operating system code that they're building, that needs to get built within the time, giving us enough time to build it. We've learned a lot of lessons from the past. Office 95 was a big bet on Windows 95. It required Windows 95. That's first time since first versions of Windows where we required a new operating system, and that was hard. We're planning a lot of things. The interesting thing is different teams in Office are going to be affected more or less based on what the focus areas of Longhorn end up being. So but a lot of that will come out of our planning in the next few months. Right now, the whole Office team is focused on finishing our Milestone 3. That's the best thing we could do. Finishing Milestone 2 and getting ready to start Milestone 3. Jumping ahead of myself. That's the best thing we can do because then we'll have more program management resources and dev resources to engage with the Windows team. So, yeah.
So occasionally you hear statements from BLG that we are spending such and such $1 billion on research. I forget the exact figure. So I'm wondering, I guess you guys are getting a portion of that.
We don't spend billions of dollars on research.
Millions of dollars.
Research and development.
Yes.
We spend billions of dollars research and development, mostly in development.
Okay, because I was going to ask, I wonder what portion of this you guys are getting, and what kind of things that you do you consider research, and how do you view the difference between that and what you expect to get from MSR?
Yeah, so the question is, what kind of research do we do on our own? I think we probably classify almost all of the work we do as development. I think we're interested in research, and it actually depends on your definition of the word. We definitely are not. We don't have any research projects, except with the exception of maybe what's going on in Peter Pathé's organization, that some of you may understand better than I do. I just haven't been exposed to that. We are pretty focused on, what's the research we need to do to help us understand what we build in the next version or two. And we try to be, we actually do try to understand where we want to go long term and make big bets. But we don't have the same kind of long-term research that you guys do. So that's where I think the organizations are complementary, because you have the ability to do some things that we feel like push comes to shove. we always get pulled back into the, okay, come up with features for the next release. And we actually try pulling you into that too, where we work together. But there's a great opportunity for you guys to be doing that research for us. We're not trying to compete with you on that. So I think when I don't know specific about those numbers, but the research group would be all of you guys, not us. So yeah, you hand up.
Any thoughts about where the role of media fits in the next version or two, and sort of how a producer is sort of becoming sort of, a media enhanced PowerPoint?
So the question is, how does media fit in to what we're doing, and producer being an example of it? I guess now would be a good time for me to preface that. I'm speaking on behalf of my own opinions. I'm not the official. I'm no longer the director of program management. So, I mean, we're obviously looking into it in a lot of areas, and especially around PowerPoint and meetings in real time is where a lot of the media we've been focusing on is. And it also depends on your definition of media. We have a lot of work on like photos and clip art and some basic kind of the media types that tend to get a lot of use in Office, as well as we want to work into audio and the kind of things that get involved in communication. So yeah, it's definitely a big part of it. It's a newer area for us, and I think it's an interesting thing. And it comes up a lot in the Longhorn discussions. So I think it'll be interesting how much of this comes out of the working with the Longhorn team. So I'm eager to see myself. Yeah.
So I know you said you don't want to just put loads of new features in, but one thing that we've been waiting for a long time in Outlook, I get a whole load of email in the morning like everyone else, and if it just had instead of as well as the person's name, just a tiny thumbnail picture of them, it would be, and we've got that database already in Microsoft of everyone's photo, it would be so much easier just to search through stuff. Now that's not really research, that's quite easy to do, I would have thought. So can we have that?
Yes. The question is specific,
just be so
a feature in Outlook where you can see the picture of the person.
Well,
I agree with you. I'd love that feature. We've talked about that feature, and there's definitely a lot of work going on, actually also with the Longhorn team, about the importance of people as objects and knowing a little more about people and being able to if you've got email from someone, being able to see their picture, their kind of state information for instant messaging, and being able to see what be able to jump to documents from that person and things like that. So there's a lot of talk about rich dealing with people in a more rich fashion. I can't commit to that one specific feature or not, but I will follow up with Mark Olson on that one. Yeah.
When they did digital pictures for Microsoft Photo ID, Nathan Myhrvold tried to make them available so people would know. And basically, security had what bogus privacy argument that you can't do it.
Yes, that's a good point. There's privacy issues. The other thing
I think they're bogus, but they made the argument.
Yeah, the other thing too is we try to. That's actually a feature we could build at Microsoft without the tie into Outlook. I mean, part of the challenge when we try to build these things into Outlook and Exchange, and with Windows, is to build it in such a way that it works for everyone's infrastructures in a more general way. But I agree with you. I think that'd be a cool feature if we could pull it off and deal with all security issues. Yeah.
Is the client-side scripting, so like VBA and things like that, what's happened to that story?
So the question is, what's happened with the VBA stuff, and then so the Visual Basic application?
Client-side hobbyist programming.
Well, it's still there. Nothing ever comes out. Actually, it's a big issue. I mean, a lot of companies build. That's one of our challenges. Is a lot of solutions are built on top of Office, and when a new version of Office comes out, those solutions need to still work. Otherwise, you're just guaranteed that people are not going to upgrade. So that is one of our big challenges. It was a lot of work to move to Visual Basic for applications across all the product teams. That's one where we did it like an application at a time, like each version of Office. So that wasn't one big thing. But I think it took 4 releases of Office for it to get into all the applications. And there's some big questions with that we need to figure out. Like it's not VB.net, it's not VBA.net. So and it's expensive. It's definitely an expensive area for us. But Office has been a very successful development platform. So we always have people assigned to that area and working on it. And some releases it gets focus, others it doesn't. I mean, I think for the next release, we're still trying to figure out what that might mean. It wasn't an area of focus when we were doing kind of a short-term, service-focused release, but it may be something we revisit with this new schedule change. So, yeah.
You didn't really touch on very much, maybe a few minutes just to envision how it works that beginning of the product cycle, features, teams are decided upon, and what's that deliberation like, and potentially, as you answer that, maybe how research can have a role then and later in terms of formulating what the product will look like.
Yeah, it's a great question about how do we do the whole vision process when we're formulating what the release is going to be, especially since I mentioned, teams get decided that way.
Right.
And it's interesting. I mean, one of the things I think that's been a hallmark of Office really has been this bottoms up, really giving a lot of responsibility down to the people who own areas. I love the fact that we have had a lot of success working across teams and coming up with visionary, areas like I mentioned the multilingual stuff that Chris Crowley did, without having to go up and get senior vice president approval and telling people to do things. So, that's kind of Office at its best. At Vision time, there's always this tension, between, bottoms up and top down. So obviously, there's a ton of good ideas for any release and different areas people are excited about. And what we typically do, what we've done the last couple of releases is, once we ship, we very much believe that the whole team, people finish. So it's not like we pull, like when we're about to finish, Office 97, like months before we take off all our good designers, good program managers, and say, okay, you guys forget about shipping, start working on the next version. We really kind of, everyone finishes, because there's so much you learn about design just in that last period of time. You learn just about the implementations just from being in all those triage meetings and stuff. So it's such a valuable time. And then we all start together. And what we'll typically do is we'll have a period of time where the group does a lot of self-education. So we had, actually, before we started this release, we had Office Think Week. And Heikki and the product planning staff kind of set up these meetings just for people to learn about new technologies and learn what's exciting. Actually, a lot of people from research came and presented at that. So, it's a great... so I think we were very influenced, actually, from things in research. And those are the great kind of events to think, how can you get involved in educating people? And then that spreads a lot. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to educate people bottoms up, get people... see people get really excited about ideas and find sponsors for your ideas to try to argue why this should be part of the vision. At the same time, there definitely is this, from Stephen and his reports, and there's a lot of, taking the feedback from people, but also balancing, feedback from like the executives and from, looking at our business situation and trying to come up with a strategy. And there's usually a couple of periods where we'll have like a whole product team meeting where Stephen will kind of give his thoughts about the business, and he won't actually say this is what our vision is going to be, because he doesn't know yet, but he'll definitely say, here are the key things I think our vision needs to satisfy. Here's some tenets that I think are going to be really important. And then we do kind of like another iteration of bottoms up, and then he will, he and his staff will then make decisions, and Heikki will announce, this is the vision statement, and then the organizations will be announced, and then we usually have, it's very interesting, we usually have like a month period where all the, the managers of the teams are named. And then there's a lot of selection. People get to decide what technology they're most interested in, and they get to choose what team that they want to work on. And the amazing thing is it kind of just works. I mean, not everyone all rushes to one team. And we usually do get a lot of balance. And then if one team is less exciting, but is something really important and doesn't have, a lot of people lined up, then other people see, wow, this is a great opportunity for me to, step up and take on new responsibilities. So we've done this a couple releases now, and it really just incredibly worked. And then those teams, then they know their rough vision, like you're the meetings services team, And then that team has a mission to then figure out, again, there's another opportunity to then work with research and other groups to figure out, what can we do specific in this area. And that's, I think, when you first get your GPM contacts and to work with, go from there. So does that make sense to understand it? It's an interesting process to see, basically 1,000 people kind of all switch gears from shipping to then going in a whole new direction. The amazing thing is, like when we did this release and we went to services, Stephen at the end of when he first announced the first vision thing did an kind of a survey of all the office employees, and I think it was really high, like 90% were like really all gung ho about the services. In fact, I remember us talking and saying, "Wow, that we must be really slow in moving the services." 90% of the people didn't think it was controversial; they all agreed. But I think a lot of it is just a testament to the just the typical Microsoft personality. I mean, people, certainly in Office and everywhere in Microsoft, really want to go for it, do exciting new things.
Next,